This is Crediton Station on the line between Exeter and Barnstaple, and also Exeter and Oakhampton. All trains stop here, and this station was opened in 1851. And the line through to Barnstaple, known today as the Tarka Line, opened 3 years later. It has a passing loop, so trains can pass here by means of a token, which is exchanged by the signalman in the nearby signal box at the level crossing here. As well as the Tarka Line, trains also pass through this station to Oakhampton on the Dartmoor line, as it's known, but that line originally extended all the way through to Plymouth, and the London and South Western Railway, which operated that line, closed in 1968 as part of the Beeching cuts. There are a number of really interesting buildings here. Many of the station buildings are Grade 2 listed, along with the footbridge, and it is a beautiful location.
As I mentioned in my introduction, Crediton Station is now a very well used station, as both the Dartmoor and North Devon lines stop here, meaning that the town has a service every half an hour to Exeter. The Beeching axe was devastating for Devon and Cornwall and saw significant numbers of rural communities lose their railway lines. The Exeter to Plymouth Railway of the London and South Western Railway, rather than following the coastline as the Great Western Railway did through Dawlish, followed the northern and western margins of Dartmoor, passing through Crediton, Oakhampton and Tavistock. The line was opened in stages between 1865 and 1879 by the London and South Western Railway, though the through route was later closed to passengers in 1968 as a result of the Beeching cuts, and the line beyond Oakhampton past Meldon Quarry closed entirely. 4 years later, on the 5th of June 1972, passenger services were withdrawn between Oakhampton to Exeter via Crediton. Freight services did continue on the line until 2011, when the slate quarry at Meldon was mothballed, and there were still the occasional passenger services between Exeter and Oakhampton on Sundays in the summer months. It was good to see regular passenger services returning to the Oakhampton-Exeter route in November 2021 as part of the Conservative government's Restoring Your Railway programme. Meanwhile, the North Devon line, which is also known as the Tarka Line, connects the city of Exeter to the town of Barnstaple along a beautifully scenic route following river valleys and Devon hills and stopping off at a number of tiny little stations along the way. The section of line between Exeter and here at Crediton opened in 1851 and 3 years later was extended through to Barnstaple. The train is just stopping briefly at the signal box, which is to the north of Crediton Station, to collect the single line working token from the signaller. And the box was opened in June 1875 and controls the entire Tarka line from just to the north of Cowley Bridge, which is at the junction with the Great Western Main Line between Exeter and Bristol, and it controls the branch line all the way to Barnstaple. All trains heading in the direction of Exeter give an audible warning to the signaller on their approach to the signal box. Under this method of operation, only a single train is allowed into each section at a time, and Crediton is the token handover point and control not only for the North Devon line to Barnstaple, but also the Oakhampton line as far as Oakhampton Station, as well as the level crossing here at Crediton. The no signalman token remote system that was introduced back in 1987 meant that control of the whole of the Tarka Line could be concentrated into just this one signal box here at Crediton. There's also a passing loop further along the Tarka Line at Eggesford Station.
This is Eggesford Station, which contains a passing loop for trains heading to Barnstaple and down to Crediton and Exeter. And it's one of two passing loops on the Tarka Line, with the other being down the line at Crediton. And the station was opened in 1854 when the section of line between Crediton and Barnstaple was opened, although the platform I'm on here wasn't added until 19 years later. It did have a goods yard at one time and a little small oil depot and a signal box, but all of that went many years ago. And the station was built on private land, the land of the Earl of Portsmouth, and one of the conditions that he made for building a station on his land was that all trains had to stop here for his convenience. And to this day, they all stop here because it's a token exchange point, part of the block token system for trains operating on the single track up to Barnstaple and the single track down to Crediton.
Trains travelling between Crediton and Barnstaple and Crediton must pass at this station. Northbound services travelling along the single line section between Crediton and Eggesford must surrender their token here before the southbound service can proceed along the single line section back down the track to Crediton. The northbound service will then collect a token, enabling it to travel along the single line section between Eggesford and Barnstaple, but will surrender the token when travelling southbound here at Eggesford before another train is allowed into the section. The loops at Eggesford are worked by hydro-pneumatic self-restoring points, and the driver and the train guard are here on the platform. The driver is obtaining the token and permission to proceed to Crediton, whilst the conductor is manually operating the level crossing gates. The Crediton signaller has overall control of the operation, but cannot operate the points or the level crossing, which is performed locally here by the train crew. The 5¼ mile line connecting Exeter with Crediton was constructed as early as 1847, but wasn't opened until 1851 due to a disagreement over the track gauge to be used. If you look at this early photograph from Crediton Station, you can see that there are 3 rails being used instead of 2, and this was to solve the problem of trains of different gauges or different widths having to use the line. Although some of the more well-known engineers of the time, such as Robert Stephenson and Isambard Kingdom Brunel, were more well known for their work on the Great Western Railway, but it was Joseph Locke who was responsible for building the railway line from Exeter to Crediton. This plaque is on the Exeter-bound platform here at Crediton Station, and many people regard Joseph Locke as a notable English civil engineer of the 19th century, particularly associated with railway projects. And he was also responsible for building the line from London Waterloo to Exeter. Meanwhile, this plaque was unveiled on the 12th of May 2001 to mark the celebrations that were held at the station by the people of Crediton on the 150th anniversary of the opening of the railway. Meanwhile, the main station building, which also now houses the tea room, was built by the Exeter and Crediton Railway in 1847 and is thought to be the oldest station building still in use as such in the west of England, and is also one of the finest. In addition to the main station building, the two wooden waiting shelters, this one here on the northbound platform to Barnstaple, and also the one on the southbound platform to Exeter, are also both Grade 2 listed. From the research I've carried out, it would appear that they were built around the early 1860s and remain largely unaltered. This very attractive Grade 2 listed footbridge to the west of the station remains largely unaltered since its construction in 1878. The piers at each end of the bridge support two flights of steps which lead up to the top landing, while the steps on the other side of the bridge lead down to the platforms. Continuing with the listed buildings and structures here at Crediton Station is this delightful Type 1 signal box, which is possibly one of the oldest original examples remaining in service on the National Rail Network, and it's still very much as it was when it was built in the 1870s. Crediton wasn't on the list of stations for closure, but the Beeching report did envisage retaining the lines between Exeter and Barnstaple and Exeter and Oakhampton, but with many fewer stations. However, the whole future of the station and the lines to Barnstaple and Oakhampton were thrown into doubt when in 1965 British Rail found that the bridges at Cowley Bridge were in need of urgent replacement at a cost of over £300,000, which today would be the equivalent of over £5 million. Thankfully, the Ministry of Transport didn't agree, particularly because Barnstaple would have been left without any rail service at all. British Rail organised the renewal of the bridges at Cowley Bridge, but reduced the line from double to single track to lessen the cost, and the threat to Crediton's train service was averted. I think there's no doubt really that Crediton is the most important stop on the Tarka Line, and it certainly has the feel of a calling point of some consequence. I like the fact that some of the buildings on the station hark back to its origins as the terminus of the broad gauge line that was opened up from Exeter in 1851. I think when you consider that around 55% of stations and around 30% of route miles across the country were lost as a result of the Beeching Review, it is so good to see the lines here, the Dartmoor line to Oakhampton and the Tarka line to Barnstaple, doing so well. This was particularly the case at Oakhampton Station, which closed to passengers in 1972, only to be reopened again in November 2021. And also the stations here on the Tarka line at Yelford, at Coppleston, Morchard Road and Newton St Sires, which were all recommended by Beeching for closure, but which today are still fulfilling a vital role for the communities that they serve.